Hi, and welcome to the 86th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the original inventor of TiddlyWiki, and today I'm joined from left to right on my screen by Matt. Matt, would you like to say hi, introduce yourself, say where you are in the world, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
Yes, so I'm Matt, or Matthias, from Stockholm, Sweden. I'm a long-time user, and I basically come up with a lot of ideas all the time, and I try to inspire people to also think they're as great as I think they are, so actually turn into something, because I can't code.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's it.
But Matt has a special talent, which is producing mock-ups. But yes, you're basically exploring being a product manager in a open source project. It's leading edge stuff. And Steve, would you like to say hi, introduce yourself, say where you're from, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
All right. My name is Steve Kimmel. I'm a engineer in Houston, Texas. I've been using TiddlyWiki for a couple of years, mostly project management, keeping track of notes and important decisions on the projects that I work on. Within TiddlyWiki, my primary interest has always been relative to the user work, and so my developer type work has largely been a issue of working on a editor interface.
Indeed, and one of the tremendous things I've really enjoyed working with Steve about is that Steve firmly categorizes himself as not being a developer. And he's working on a problem that is clearly in the domain of development. And then when he apologetically describes his approach, which is a bit trial and error. And then, of course, I tell him that what he's describing is exactly what all software developers do for their entire career. So that's been a great pleasure to watch. And one of the things that we will touch on, hopefully if we've got time, is a particular roadblock that Steve currently has with the WYSIWYG editor, which is quite an interesting area to discuss from the point of view of shedding some light on TiddlyWiki's architecture. But today we were going to start with something slightly different, which was prompted by a discussion before the session started about the international success of TiddlyWiki. And I think it was Matt who asked where geographically we had evidence that TiddlyWiki was being used. And of course, one of the differences between TiddlyWiki and a classic online service, Facebook or a Twitter or something, is that when people use TiddlyWiki, they don't leave any footprint for us to see. And I always think that's a tremendous advantage of TiddlyWiki. I like the idea of being able to use my computer without necessarily leaving a contrail behind. But there are still some indirect measurements we can take. One of them is Google Analytics. So we have Google Analytics on tiddlywiki.com. If you're not aware, there's a Google Analytics plugin for TiddlyWiki 5. You have to add your special code that identifies your website to Google Analytics, and then you can produce exactly these same kind of statistics. So you can see it's opened up on the audience overview, which just shows you traffic. In this case, I think, where were we? End of 2014 to, those aren't very useful dates, are they? We go from December 2013 to today, say. Bang. So you can see that TiddlyWiki's traffic is fairly stable, with the odd spike, which roughly corresponds to occurrences of TiddlyWiki in on blogs and Hacker News and so on. And if we go to geo, we get two different types of breakdown. Breakdown of language. So it might be more helpful if it gave us a pie chart of this. Let's have a look if we can do that. So we see, well, we see how slow Google Analytics is, but actually it's crunching quite a long period of time, but that's obviously for these kind of statistics would be the most useful. While it's doing that, we can see, oh, no, it's done it. Not very helpful. So that's US English, and British English is that red one. So comfortably more than 50% for the two different varieties of English. German, which figures, we see there's quite a few German speakers who are active in the discussion group. But I think the Japanese one's interesting, that that's a pretty hefty number of users. As with French, they're particularly Japanese, they're not represented on the mailing list in a way that that I can see. Might even say that about Russian, actually, that there's been a couple of...
Jeremy?
Hello?
Jeremy, sorry interrupting you. You asked us to interrupt if you were screen sharing and someone joined. Danielo just joined.
Oh,
so
great.
Maybe you have to.
Danielo, hi, how are you doing?
Hello, it has been a long time, but I finally got time to join a meeting. I'm glad to be here again.
Excellent. Very, very pleased to see you here, Danielo. Would you like to introduce yourself, actually? Just say, give your name, where you're from, and say something about your work with TiddlyWiki.
Yeah, sure. My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I'm from Spain, and I use TiddlyWiki personally for storing all my knowledge nodes, and I use it at work to store notes and knowledge about my day-to-day work. And I also I'm development. I have developed some plugins for TiddlyWiki, and I'm working right now with. I can say I don't remember his name, but I'm helping to develop the coach adapter plugin for TiddlyWiki, which is very exciting. And that's all. That's me.
Excellent. And indeed, Danielo, you've been, I think, particularly productive and inventive recently. You've released a lot of new stuff. It's been really great to see. And I think it would be marvelous if perhaps a little later you could give us a demo of the CouchDB stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we were just briefly looking at this geographic breakdown of tiddlywiki.com traffic. And this was in answer to some questions about where in the world TiddlyWiki people are coming from. That was by language. This is by country. So actually very, very similar results. And how far through? Yeah. So I don't know what one can conclude from this. I think, say, the main obvious thing that jumps out is there's a fair amount of Japanese traffic and a very small amount of Japanese traffic on the group. And so I think that highlights to me the fact that at the best of times, the people who are active on the group, I think, are a tiny subset of the overall number of TiddlyWiki users. So there's first the point that many people get the answers and the help they need without ever having to post to the group, just by using it as a read-only resource, so to speak. And here I think we're seeing what must be a substantial community of users for whom the existing mailing list isn't going to be much use, and so of course we don't see them there.
Could we do something to, since the Japanese then specifically is such a big but invisible group, could there be something done so to engage them? Maybe.
Well,
I don't know.
There's a TiddlyWiki Chinese group, so as in a Google group that I think Bram Chen set up originally. I'm not sure how active it is, and that remains, for any language, I was going to say any language group, but any group of users who want to are encouraged to set up a mailing list, and of course we'll link to it from tiddlywiki.com. But I think there's a bit more to say that really, if we go to the pre-release, I've just updated the pre-release, so this is up to date. I think there's insufficient indications that TiddlyWiki is an international project. I used for the panel to advertise 5.1.8 actually. I've got different languages, but really, I think we'd rather. If I go to the full edition at the moment, the full edition is the only place where you see the complete list of all languages. Whereas intuitively, I feel that all of those flags should be visible on tiddlywiki.com, so that people who speak those languages don't need to dig around, but would get that sort of instant recognition that would allow them to say, ah, yes, this is for me, as well as being for all those English people in the world. So I think that's my recurring thought. We've talked endlessly about the need to refactor the front page, and that would be one of my success criteria, is that there would be much more obvious signposting of the availability of translated editions.
Jeremy, how do you plan to make those flags behave? To click on it and move the user to that specific version, or to include all the language plugins in the index page?
I'm not sure actually what makes the most sense. I mean, the main thing for me was the signpost, but I think another thing on my list is that at the moment we've got editions for some languages. So here's Mario's German starter document. So it's an empty.html that includes the German language plugins, and in fact, what am I talking about? It also, in this case, includes quite a lot of the German language documentation as well. So I would like to be consistent about that. So I'd like there to be an edition for each language. If there's an edition for each language, that's the obvious place to push people who to push bad leather. That's the obvious place for the flags to link to. So in the case of German, it's linking to a the German version of the documentation. If we don't have the translated documentation, then I think maybe linking to the empty edition is the next best thing, because at least that's their starting point for people of that language.
Maybe this is what you mean with a sign. You said sign or something like a signpost.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that to sense what language the user is using?
No. What I'd like is to be showing the complete catalogue of languages as part of the above the fold site, so that in order for them to work as signposts, one's relying on the fact that the people for whom those flags are important have some kind of instantaneous recognition. I mean, speaking for myself, your home flag, so to speak, does rather jump out at you.
Yes, of course. What I'm thinking is that maybe there could be something sensing, just like the languages are sensed.
The problem there is that I remember from earlier work that browser language settings are almost always wrong. It's one of those areas where, for reasons that I may not be completely up to date with, but browsers don't always report the correct language. And I think that's a combination of people needing to, in order for some sites to work, needing to be showing that they understand English. So the browsers sending ENUS, etc.
Yes.
So that's my recollection. So in most other sites, I think where they do it, they do it via geo-IP detection. Just in fact as we saw on Google Analytics, where you track the IP address of the visitor and figure out the geographic location from that.
And even that has difficulties in it. I spent a year living in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean is a real hodgepodge.
Yes.
I think if it were up to me, you've got another person who's joined here. I would put a series of buttons across the top of the hello page, which would just show the individual flags right there as a central bar.
I think that's exactly right. That they, well, one of the things that you can see here is that they don't work that well as a vertical stack. They run into each other. So I think I need to kind of outline and separate them. But yeah, a horizontal strip is a conventional way people are used to seeing flags lining up, I think. So I think I said this before, but I'd like to migrate tiddlywiki.com to being a focused on signposts to other information and on news. So having the primary kind of thing being a news feed that is continually updated. That's not something we can achieve necessarily right now, but step by step is where I'd like to get to. I mean, one of my tabs that I've got open is these guys, ThoughtWorks. They do a project management, an open source project management tool. I've not used it, so I'm not recommending it or anything. But it just struck me again how these kinds of sites are very conventional. Nice simple presentation, gives you, it's easy to parse what's going on, not too overwhelming when you go there. Use of, in this case, I think these are animated GIFs, but use of screencasts to show what the software is for. Lots of room to breathe using vertical spacing to separate items. And I think tiddlywiki.com needs to be a bit like this, just in order to, for as long as it looks different. Sorry, that's a bad example. I should come here. But this is so different.
Sorry, Jeremy.
Hello.
You did ask us to interrupt you, correct? If someone joined. Yes, because Jed has joined.
Oh no, I've let Jed in. Hi, Jed.
Okay, fair.
I'm sorry, Jed. I was just finishing my immediate rant, and I was going to ask you to introduce yourself. But Jed, hi. Where have you? Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself, and perhaps tell us where you are on your circumnavigation of the globe?
Hi, I'm Jed. I make in my socks tiddlyspot.com. I am working on a PhD and starting up a company, so I've been really busy lately. And supposedly I'm in the middle of moving to Paris, but due to visa shenanigans, I'm still in New Mexico, and I probably won't be in Paris until the end of next month, which I'm not happy about.
Oh, the end of June. Oh, well, that's a shame. But Jed, I hope sometime in July we'll get a chance to meet up. Hope we'll see you in Oxford, London. One of the things I was going to talk about actually, and it's worth bringing it up now, is Tiddly Camp Paris, which sadly Jed is going to miss. So let me show you here. We've got hangout-xx.tiddlyspot.com. This is, as an experiment, I've created a TiddlySpot wiki for this Hangout, and the idea is that I've posted the agenda here, as you can see, such as insofar as we have an agenda, and it gives us a place to put links and so on. So 6th of June, TiddlyWiki Camp Paris. I shall be there. I did look at a map of where we are, and I can't now remember how to describe where we are, but it's pretty central. And yes, here we're running from 1 o'clock till 6 o'clock. Hopefully I'll be there a bit earlier than that. Really looking forward to it. I think I said last time, slightly embarrassed that I'm going to a French event and I'm going to have to speak English, but that's just, I'll do my uttermost to display my inadequate French as best I can, at any rate. So let's move on. There's a question in the sidebar which is about TiddlySpot. TiddlySpot is run by Simon Baird and Daniel Baird. You'll find that if you address them directly, they're very active. I mean, they're both, as I understand it, are busy with with non-TiddlyWiki things, but they continue to look after TiddlySpot whenever it needs to, and I've always found them to be very responsive. So moving on, there were a couple of very small things that I wanted to cover, which are new developments in 5.19. Oh, hang on, I can unscreen share, but you'll see that I'm, because of where I'm sitting, it makes me look a good deal more anonymous and scary than I really am. Yes, so a couple of new features for 5.1.9, which in fact means going back to screen sharing. One of them is a classic Matt Goldman. In fact, Matt suggested this, and I think did an earlier version. And it's the idea of a banner that people can choose to add to their TiddlyWiki sites that advertises the fact that it's powered by TiddlyWiki. The version that I've done, you can see here in the pre-release, so I should say, here we go, tiddlywiki.com/pre-release. You can see it here too. So it's a little blue button that stays stuck to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Danielo pointed out that on mobile layouts, it's quite disruptive, which I'd have to agree with. My current thinking is that we should probably just hide it entirely on mobile devices, in that I find it hard to imagine a way that we can accomplish the goal of a banner advertising TiddlyWiki that isn't detrimental to the user experience on mobile. I think Matt and other people have suggested more sophisticated things that it could do. So for instance, it might be that the only part of this that's visible by default is the cat, is Jack, and then when one mouses over, perhaps more of the banner could slide in and particularly tell you what it's going to do before you click on it. And when I do click on it, it takes me to tiddlywiki.com in a new tab, but arguably it's not terribly friendly to be opening a new tab without giving the user a clear expectation of what's going to happen. So the idea was to at least if we establish even a simple powered by TiddlyWiki plugin, people can include it, and later we can upgrade it. So here we go. So one of the simpler plugins, all it's got is SVG documentation and a tiny little bit of wiki text to make that guy appear down there. So that was one thing. Any comments or thoughts? Matt, I say it was you that I think originally suggested the idea.
Yes, it's been many people. I think Felix also has been active in opinionating on it. But I think it makes sense to have something that encourages or that informs the visitor to a page that it is actually a TiddlyWiki, and then to give them a chance to link to that. Now, my thought is that considering that we want to spread, care about the TiddlyWiki project, when people visit, when non-TiddlyWiki people visit TiddlyWiki pages, I think it's really, really a chance for us to reach people that don't know anything about TiddlyWiki. We don't have any chance to reach those people otherwise. So I would prefer, and I understand that not everyone thinks like this, but I would prefer that it's actually part of the empty distribution, and that, or I should say, but that it's really easy to remove it. How do you guys feel about that?
That's a very interesting idea. What do other people think?
That's a fine approach to this working. Part of my thought, looking at the display there, it might be a little less obtrusive on a mobile device if instead of having the full powered by Jack TiddlyWiki, we had just the tiddlywiki.com. It would be a little smaller, and it would be a little less offensive. It would also give you a more clear indication of, if you click that, exactly where you're going on that. But I do like the idea of having that be something that we could simply easily turn off. Now, yeah, I don't know how much good it'll do us in terms of recruiting new folks, but that's part of what it is.
Cool. I mean, I think I'm obviously really like the idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And I wanted to, establish something official early on so that we can, experiment and explore. But I still think there's quite a list of things that we can all be doing in order to try and spread TiddlyWiki, and this is a part of that. I think part of the spreading is to try and find ways. One of the things I always say about open source that's so interesting is the way that the collaboration is asymmetric. I just get on with fiddling around with TiddlyWiki, and most of the collaboration happens as a byproduct of me doing that work. You all see commits flying by on GitHub and get the opportunity to dive in and comment. And I really love that. I really love then that collaboration for me, it's not that it comes for free, but it's a completely different feeling than, I don't know, when I started at work, when in offices, collaboration often feels like something that you do instead of doing other things. It's a full-time activity. So what I like in that framework, what I like about the banner is that it's no effort. It's something that you can switch on, and then your site in perpetuity will act as an advert for TiddlyWiki, and that's great. But obviously, at the other end of the spectrum, there are active things, and the number, we've talked about this before. I think the number one thing that people can do is submit TiddlyWiki to other sites to be written about. So to Hacker News, obviously, is somewhere where it already crops up from time to time. But Lifehacker, there's a lot of websites out there whose job is to publish content that's interesting and entertaining to their readers. And for many people, TiddlyWiki is novel. And so figuring out the right environments in which to jump up and say, hey guys, there's this thing, TiddlyWiki, that does these things that may be useful to you. I think that's also incredibly powerful. We've seen that. We've seen how TiddlyWiki can thrive in vertical areas. So how even today, thanks to Twine, TiddlyWiki is very popular as a way of making interactive fiction. And there's so much activity around Twine that it sometimes makes me think, actually, that's enough to sustain an open source project. That's a big enough community. And TiddlyWiki has the chance of not just servicing the needs of, say, the interactive fiction community, but of everybody else, people who are doing academic research, etc. Anyway, sorry, I slightly bent the topic from the banner to other things. Okay.
Regarding that topic, Jeremy, about spreading, you mentioned hack. How do you say that? What page was? Hacker.
Etherpad? Oh no, Hacker News. Sorry, I meant Hacker News.
Yeah, I was going today to write to a Spanish page about TiddlyWiki, and I thought about that because they were making a review of a new product that is an open source project of Evernote. I think that we are on a situation where there are a lot of concern about privacy. People is looking for alternatives to Evernote, OneNote. So I think we are in a good moment to try to spread TiddlyWiki as an alternative to those products.
I quite agree. I think the TiddlyWiki is newsworthy, basically, because all that surveillance stuff and privacy stuff, it's going to continue to be in the news, I think, for the next few years. And TiddlyWiki, you're right, it's a completely different new story that's absolutely addresses these concerns that seem to be of increasing importance for people. So there's a real opportunity there. And one of the things that I've seen is, for instance, I showed you the traffic earlier on. Some of the things that can prompt quite significant spikes are really tiny. As pretty much as Danielo said, somebody leaving a comment on a blog post about something else. That can, on a busy blog, that can generate a lot of traffic. And to do that, of course, we don't even need to persuade anybody else to write about TiddlyWiki. It's just we're riding on the coattails of somebody who's written material that's of interest, to people who might benefit from TiddlyWiki. I'm loving my mysterious silhouette, by the way.
Can I comment a bit on that?
Please do.
I think those are really good points, especially to try to bring up TiddlyWiki in other contexts, and especially when you're talking to other developers and people that really are potential contributors to the TiddlyWiki project if they were involved. That I really think makes sense. But I think we have the problem that while we all know that someone is making noise in the background now.
That's my clock.
Someone is playing music.
That's my clock chiming, I'm afraid, in the background.
Okay, don't worry. We know that TiddlyWiki can be applied to all these areas, but people in general don't know. So how do we convey this to them? Because we are very limited on actual applications for TiddlyWiki. We don't have any ready-made, as you would call them, I think, editions of TiddlyWiki. Now, Evernote is an exceptional example because it's so conceptually similar in some sense to TiddlyWiki. But otherwise, people looking for instance, I looked on tiddlywiki.com, and there is someone who has adopted TiddlyWiki for baby journaling. I remember seeing that, and someone else for like research papers, and someone else for other areas. Now we know that TiddlyWiki can be adopted for those things, but the general people, when they hear of us or the TiddlyWiki, I think they hear the word wiki, and they perhaps see the word what is it, like a web notebook, and they're thinking, well, I need a baby journaling system, to bring up that example again, or they're thinking I need some kind of household management software. This TiddlyWiki thing is obviously not the relevant. I mean, it's a wiki and it's a web notebook. That's not for me. I fear that this is their first guess, and then they perhaps move on in their Google search. So my spontaneous thought when I hear these wonderful, points that we really can reach these people is that if we just put together a few quick additions with specific application areas, I think it would be easier to make people feel like, oh, maybe this is something.
Yes, I mean, let me echo that rather. I think that I think you're identifying the right problem, which is another way of saying it is that TiddlyWiki is a generic tool that makes it very hard for people to assimilate what it can do for them, and that the solution to that, I still think, is purpose-built editions for particular purposes. You're tracking my thoughts rather on something, which is that some of those basic editions I think we could do quite easily. So like the task management, there's a task management example on tiddlywiki.com. To take that into its own wiki, surround it with the right kind of documentation, with no additional functionality, I think could be terrific. It makes something that's really obvious what its purpose is. It's still very remixable because we would know that it's still, pretty much a generic TiddlyWiki. Yeah, here I'm not talking about GSD. I'm talking about something much, much simpler. So I think the getting things done is an example of an area where it's very clear from practitioners who've put lots of effort into it that there is, at one end of the spectrum, a need for really quite complex solutions. And we are therefore amazingly fortuitous, because I think that's what GSD5 is one of the things that really shows the power of TiddlyWiki, because it is, even if you don't want GSD, if you see what I mean. You look at that and you go, well, it's a complicated thing that has been done in TiddlyWiki. It sort of demonstrates fantastically TiddlyWiki's potential. But I think as an entree, as a way of pulling people in, we can actually have something much simpler. Similarly, academic notes, a note-taking edition, I think could be little more than perhaps a derivative of Matt's fast new Tiddler plugin and some standard sidebar templates. So absolutely, really keen to do that. What I was trying to emphasize there is that I think this is really easy. So we all, myself included, tend to, out of the big tangly pile of things that we could do to TiddlyWiki, we all tend to choose the quite difficult things. There's Silvain is working on the WYSIWYG editor, which is an unsolved problem for TiddlyWiki. It's a difficult thing. I've been putting effort recently into sync stuff, so is Danielo as well. But these are really, compared to TiddlyWiki's core functionality, these are, what's the word? They're luxuries. They're more complicated things. There's actions that we could be taking, like throwing together a teacher's edition of TiddlyWiki, for instance, that any of us could do. And yes, we should be doing it. The other thing I was going to just show you quickly was some work that Richard Smith did a few weeks ago, and we need to pick it up again. And it's this, which the intention is that this become education.tiddlywiki.com, and that it becomes a front page about TiddlyWiki, particularly targeted at people in education. So it's we made the point before, I think, that with the language editions, there's a role for an edition that includes documentation and an empty edition. Here, I think what I'm aiming for is that there be a sort of central jumping off point that then points to several specific editions. So for instance, the Scholars edition that we've already got. So those are two things that I think we can do. Create editions that are starting to, what's the word, a bundle of plugins and configurations suitable for a particular purpose. So we publish some of those. We know that task management is the obvious one to start on. I think note-taking is number 2. And I need to get to work with Richard to get that education site up and running. And by doing so, we're hopefully also demonstrating to people that, that there may be other similar sites, say gaming.tiddlywiki.com or interactivefiction.tiddlywiki.com, anywhere where you've got a cluster of activity around TiddlyWiki. A page like that, I think, can make good sense. And then the motivation for it was partly contained actually in what Matt said, which was there's a bunch of us that think TiddlyWiki has tremendous potential in education. So let's say you have a fabulous conversation over Skype with somebody about TiddlyWiki's potential in education, but then what pointers do you send them? And at the moment, for an educator with no experience of TiddlyWiki, arriving at tiddlywiki.com requires an awful lot of them in order to see why TiddlyWiki might be relevant to their interests. So this is, I think it's a development of the edition idea. The edition idea is for people who wish to use TiddlyWiki in a particular context. And I think these portals, for want of a better word, are for people who want to understand TiddlyWiki in a particular context. And so we can do combinations of them both. I need to talk to Richard, but the plan is to make it so that Richard does the updates to education.tiddlywiki.com, and then the hope is that will allow us to explore ways of making tiddlywiki.com more regularly updated, and to, frankly, to shift the work of doing the updates so that other people in the group can do it too.
Can I ask you anything there on this? Very, very positive to hear these things. The thing is, it's you obviously who run tiddlywiki.com, if you are positive to these thoughts, which you are obviously, then maybe you could say that on the board, so that people who with the competence to actually put together good standard editions of things, so that they feel that, oh, okay, if I just make it good enough, so that know it looks good and that Jeremy likes it, then it will actually be put up there. I think that would be a good incentive for people to work on these things, because otherwise people don't really realize that that you're positive to the whole idea.
Yes.
And maybe, if I may just suggest, if you could list like 10 additional concepts that you think is a good start, people can, okay, the task management thing, okay, I have some good things for that, or those areas. I think that would be beneficial.
I don't want to argue with you, Matthias, about this, but isn't that basically, we have the one page in the full edition online where it has the blue tabs, community, and developments and stuff like that. Isn't that basically what that does already? It's granted it may be a little deep in the web page, to get to that, but that is there.
But it is, as you point out, it is deep, but it's also like mixed between other things that are not of that type, if you know what I mean. If, like, for instance, what is the reason to not put the education.tiddlyswiki.com there? Well, apparently there's something special about that. I guess I'm asking you, Jeremy, what made you feel that education.tiddlywiki.com is justified?
Oh, because of the conversations that we were having about educational aspects of TiddlyWiki. So basically what I described happened, that Ed did this amazing job of gathering together a group of people interested in TiddlyWiki, and he bought into that group people with no prior experience of TiddlyWiki, but he did a great job of explaining to them why TiddlyWiki was relevant. And it was at that point that I felt that we just had a bit of a gap. That, how do we then? I think often in terms of publishing stuff, one needs to, how can I put it, that you need to give the armory to other people. So what tiddlywiki.com needs to absolutely communicate to casual users who end up on tiddlywiki.com. But there's another vital use, which is for people who already know about TiddlyWiki to have the right things to send to somebody else. So any of you who might want to recommend TiddlyWiki to a friend of your mother's or something, what's the link that you send them? And that's quite an interesting problem, because it's nothing to do with trying to pretend we understand the people who come to tiddlywiki.com and how they're going to navigate the site and so on, because it's a link that we want out of it. And I think that's what education.tiddlywiki.com is about. It's a community resource that we can use to be more precise about where we point people who might be interested in TiddlyWiki. Anything else on that?
Yeah. Two small things regarding users attraction. I think we can get some of people that used to use Markdown if we add some more export formats, because most of the Markdown tools allows you to export to PDF, to Word, to doc format, and TiddlyWiki only allows you to export to HTML as an published format, because JSON is not a very friendly format. The TID is not a very friendly format, so we only have HTML. So I think that adding more export formats will eventually attract more people. And regarding tiddlywiki.com, I used to use it as an entry point when I want to search for plugins, when I want to search for other editions, and most of the times I surrender. I leave it and I end looking for what I'm looking for on the groups, directly on Google, because I don't understand how the community tiddler is arranged, and I really, it's really hard for me to search for resource on tiddlywiki.com, and I think it should be easier to find other projects from the main page.
Okay, that's interesting. So the first thing that you said there, Danielo, was about more export formats. I think it's quite useful for me to draw a distinction between. Actually, let me stop screen sharing. To draw a distinction between, basically, what has Jeremy been doing for the last 3.5, 4 years with TiddlyWiki is that I have been adding features to TiddlyWiki to make it more complete. So, and in that time, doing that has not led to, you know, a big uptick in TiddlyWiki's popularity. So I've actually come to the conclusion that although new features are useful, I don't think what's holding us back is features. So it's a very odd, sorry, my clock's just going again. It's a very odd situation. It's not to say that we don't need new features. So in order for a project like TiddlyWiki to be healthy, in order for people in the community to feel that TiddlyWiki can change to meet their needs as it changes, TiddlyWiki needs to be seen to being actively developed, and that means, you know, including new features. But what I'm not so sure about is that there's any new features that are going to, you know, single-handedly make a difference to the adoption. The features that maybe could make a difference, well, again, we've touched on this before, is features that plug TiddlyWiki into other existing communities. So, and Danielo mentioned an element of that with Markdown. So there's undoubtedly, there is a loosely knit community of people around the world who are interested in Markdown. So positioning TiddlyWiki as a useful tool for Markdown people is a great way to do what I'm talking about, of then plugging in TiddlyWiki into a big new environment. Another example would be Dropbox. So I still think that a feature that would make a big difference to TiddlyWiki's adoption is really first-class, easy integration with Dropbox. So that I think what most people want is individual tiddlers to be individual files in Dropbox, but to get the classic TiddlyWiki experience where all the tiddlers are in TiddlyWiki at the same time. So I think that's an example of a feature that it's outward-looking because it connects TiddlyWiki to something else. In this case, the vast number of people out there who are trying to use Dropbox you know, to achieve personal productivity goals or something. So that's a tiny comment on the idea of new features, is saying if we're going to look at new features that are about driving adoption, then I think an interesting thing is features that open up an existing audience, an existing community of people. I'm also really interested in what we can do without adding new features. You know, there's a couple of elements to this. We've got people like Matt who are anxious to communicate to the project, eager to communicate, to contribute to the project, can't necessarily do so as a developer. And so it means, again, that to make the best use of all these amazing brains we've got around the project, that means figuring out the things other than development that need doing. And a big part of that, I think, is presentation, signposting, and so on. Then, Danielo, you mentioned difficulties of searching for stuff on tiddlywiki.com. I think that that's one of the issues that I want to address with this simplification of tiddlywiki.com's role that I mentioned earlier. So I think an issue with tiddlywiki.com, sorry if we go back to it, is that it's got everything in it. So it's got TiddlyWiki's documentation. This community stuff ends up being pretty hidden, and yet it's it's fulfilling an important need within the project to communicate the existence of new community resources. If you're Danielo, I will just spend 2 minutes showing you how it is organized, because it is people like you and the other people on the call who may be able to contribute improvements. So basically, we've got these blue panels correspond to individual tiddlers. These individual tiddlers are tagged with several different tags. Resources in this case, tutorials in this case, and examples articles. So those 4 different types of community resources that we have links to. Then the latest tab just shows the latest few of the tiddlers with those tags, but of all types together. And here you get the latest ones, but filtered by type. So what you notably can't do is search. There could usefully perhaps be a search box here that's just for searching community resources, and that would just emit the results as another of these lists of blue boxes. I think these things should have screenshots. I find this presentation, this could look inviting and intriguing. It could look like Pinterest does. By the way, somebody's clunking a bit. I'm not sure. I'm going to. Yes, Matt, I think it's your keyboard actually. That's what's going on, Danielo. Therefore, at the moment, when you search for something like Tobias's stuff, say, you can easily get it as an individual tiddler, but obviously the way that you do that is a bit disconnected from the presentation of this stuff here. And as I say, I would like tiddlywiki.com to not have the documentation in it, to be signposts to other editions and developer documentation and so on, but to really highlight this news stuff, and obviously to have a mechanism so that we can have more timely updates of the news.
We went through this routine when we first started off with the Google Analytics, and I did notice 1 or 2 things on that I thought were of particular interest. It did tell us that the average visitor is spending about 2.5 minutes on the website, and that slightly less than half of them were brand new visitors, which tells me that the typical person isn't getting very far through your website at all before they basically give up. I don't know what we do about that, but that seems to me to be one of the lessons to be learned from that analytics.
We could drill into that a little bit more and see. I mean, I would caution that. Where is it? I'd caution that Google Analytics doesn't always tell you what you think it's telling you, and so there's the issues there are about the ways that it makes its measurements. Don't always. They're not always able to measure the things that people want to have measured, so they measure the things that they can and infer the things that they can't. I've seen interesting cases recently of people trying to reconcile their logs with Google Analytics and struggling. No, it also seems to not be working right now. There we go. So let's go for the last. Where should we go from? I'm doing an hourly report, which is the worst thing. Okay, so this I think you're talking about average session duration. I don't really know. I mean, 2 minutes to me sounds like a reasonably long time to be spending on a website. I mean, when I think about what I do when I'm sent a link, but I'm also very suspicious that when I'm sent a link, if there's something new and interesting, I'll often leave the tab open. In some cases for a few days, in some cases for a few weeks. So each time I restart my browser, or I'm obviously hitting that site and showing up as being a visitor. So I don't know. I'm not really very expert on this. What else does it show us? New versus returning, that was one of the things he mentioned.
Right.
New visitors, slightly more than returning visitors. I don't know that tells much. See, because I use tiddlywiki.com, for instance. I go there all the time in order to get things, in order to get a particular link for something that I'm answering. So
I think I mean, Danielo was talking about going back and research, searching for stuff on that. Obviously, he gets counted more than once there. 0 to 10 seconds for the vast majority.
But you see, that's the sort of thing I don't really believe, because that, I mean, do you know how Google Analytics tracks? I mean, I can guess how Google Analytics tracks visitor duration, but for all I know, it doesn't. That might not even work properly on tiddlywiki.com. I mean, it looks a bit unbelievable that that number of sessions could be less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's an. Go ahead, Danielo.
Sorry, it was just a question about you are thinking about moving documentation to a separate space we have with development edition, and focus tiddlywiki.com on making TiddlyWiki attractive. Is that the idea?
That's roughly the idea, yeah. So I think possibly before you joined, Danielo, I showed this site, which is an open source project management tool from ThoughtWorks. And I'm not showing it because I recommend it or anything. It just happened to be something that somebody had sent me a link to for some reason. And I thought it was quite a good example of what websites today are often like. Really simple signposts that for us up here would be developer, get started, those kinds of things. Maybe languages, and when you click on languages, our row of flags comes up underneath. And
Yes.
Then front and center, a very simple slogan, a call to action for what you need to do, and then a video or something that's showing what the software does. And this idea of nice, simple, delineated vertical chunks.
That's one of the things that I wanted to say previously, is that TiddlyWiki seems to be the only project that use the actual application as its main site, and many similar tools does not use its application as the main site. So maybe, and only maybe, we should adopt that workflow, and not a try now button which opens a real TiddlyWiki and make a really simple front page.
Yes, I mean so using TiddlyWiki as its own front page for a long time, I felt was was the best thing for us to do, because it made it as easy as possible for people to try it out. And I think that has served us reasonably well. It works quite well for some types of users, people like us, basically, who are intrigued by something like that. But yes, the idea is to try and sell TiddlyWiki in a much more conventional way, present it more conventionally. But it's also to solve. We've got a problem at tiddlywiki.com. There's a lot on it now, so it's already separated to some degree, the developer site and so on. But increasingly, I've got to see TiddlyWiki. I think it's more helpful to see tiddlywiki.com as a cluster of wikis rather than one individual wiki. I was just going to say, oh yes, so forgive me, but one of the things Danielo said there was about tiddlywiki.com not necessarily being a TiddlyWiki. So one, I'm actually thinking that if we go down the route that I'm suggesting, that maybe tiddlywiki.com would be a static rendering. So it would be one of the ways that we demonstrate how TiddlyWiki can be used to produce a static website that then obviously has excellent characteristics on mobile devices and so on. So that would be, oddly, we'd still be eating our own dog food, as the expression goes, if we did that, because we'd be demonstrating the value of static sites. Danielo is pointing out how the site we were just looking at has a picture of a laptop with the software on it. My idea, so something that this tells you a lot about me, I think. So also identified that that's a really common thing, and here they've got, I think, animated GIFs, so you can see the software working. There's obviously no commentary, but I don't think there should be on a site like this as well. Oops. But my interesting idea is to do this, where you can set a transform. Right, so now I've just scaled the main TiddlyWiki page down, just using CSS transforms. So TiddlyWiki still works, but we've, oh, sorry, the clock's coming on again. TiddlyWiki still works, but with a reduced size screen. We could put a box around it, and then this could be what you see, sorry, clicking on the wrong link, could be what you see inside the laptop screen. And the interesting thing is, you know how every time I interact with TiddlyWiki, switching a tab, for instance, I am changing the state of the Tiddler store. So here we go. So I click on a different tab. You can see over here that Tiddler changed, and that Tiddler, if I open it, it's got the name of the currently open tab. So each time I change the tab, you can see it switching there. So what that means is that one could do a screencast of TiddlyWiki just by recording the times at which certain Tiddler values changed. So imagine a JSON file of Tiddlers where each Tiddler in the file, as well as the fields that we're used to, had an extra field which was the time at which that Tiddler value should be set. So then it would look to as we change the value, say, of that Tiddler, it would look as if the tabs were changing. So we could do, the reason why I say it tells you more about me is that I've, in 5 seconds, I've taken the fairly simple idea of taking a screencast of TiddlyWiki and putting it in a laptop screen, and I've turned it into an incredibly complicated mechanism for doing general screencasts of TiddlyWiki content. And in fact, the technique is terribly interesting because one could also use it for generating screenshots. So a problem that Eric has got, for instance, is that he wants to include screenshots of how to do basic things within TiddlyWiki. The challenge is that the screenshots, once you take them, it's if then the core icon for the tick changes, then the screenshot's out of date. But we could write code that automatically generates TiddlyWiki screenshots, because basically a particular screenshot, you can reproduce it just by reproducing the values of the Tiddlers at that time. So apologies for going off in on a slight tangent.
Very, very interesting. I think. By the way, why am I? For some reason, it seems that I am on display instead of you, Jeremy.
That's because you're talking.
Yeah, but also before that, I don't know. Okay, maybe just for me. Anyway, what I wanted to add to that, the time thing that you brought up, it can also be used to make demos and instructional, not videos then, but almost videos.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those things where it's interesting to me because it's one tiny little capability, not much code. It capitalizes on something that TiddlyWiki already does, And yes, it seems to open up 2 or 3 interesting areas. So let's, just 1 second. Next thing, oh, hang on, sorry, you were going to, oh, Matt, there's a comment from Matt. Can we just get back for a moment to the thing about including spread TiddlyWiki in the empty edition, but with the option to very easily disable or delete it? Matt, what I think we should do is for 5.1.9, put it out as a plugin. And that would be, I think, the best way to get feedback on whether it's a good way of attracting people, of advertising TiddlyWiki. And then once we're, I think then that's a better time to have the conversation about building it in all the time. Let's sort of knock off the rough edges and make sure that, I mean, I think at the moment it's a fairly brutal thing, and it may be that we need to refine it. I did keep it very simple to start with. So the next thing was, yes, the fluid fixed layout. So this is another change that's actually been up on the pre-release for a couple of weeks, but it was done after the last Hangout. So the prompt for this is worth mentioning that we've had a few people for a long time whose problem with TiddlyWiki 5 has been that it's insufficiently like TWclassic. So there's one guy I'm thinking of in particular who regards TiddlyWiki 5 as broken because it doesn't out of the box allow you to reproduce the TWclassic layout. Now, right at the beginning, it was important to me that TiddlyWiki 5 didn't precisely resemble TWclassic. Because I wanted to show that it was different. And to be fair, it's so different internally, making it look similar on the outside would have been perhaps misleading for TWclassic people. Danielo is just saying in the sidebar that he thinks TWclassic has a horrible layout. I also came to think that it had a horrible layout. So the issue here is that TWclassic uses what's called fluid layout. So if I screen share again, and we'll just go to TWclassic on here. So as I expand and shrink the window, you can see how the main story river expands to take up all of the available space. A consequence of that means that if you have a big screen, or in this case just make the fonts very small, you get unreadably long lines of text. And the advice is uncompromising that you need 50 to 70 characters a line in order to get maximum readability. So to me, TWclassic layout is suboptimal readability for many types of display. But what I did decide to go ahead and do was to add part of that capability to TiddlyWiki 5. So there's now a setting in theme tweaks, sidebar layout. So the default that we're used to is a fixed story and a fluid sidebar. So that's the current default, where the sidebar expands and contracts for the available space, and the story column stays fixed. And the new mode is where you have a fluid story and a fixed sidebar. So now down here, there's a sidebar width, and I can change that to if I want, and the sidebar stays stuck to the right-hand side of the screen with the
That's one of the problems of the current way of customizing. That you have to trust that when you set it to, for example, you totally delete the value and everything got screwed, you have to trust that you are going to type in the right place to make it fine again.
Yes, it's annoying, isn't it? I think we need. An
apply button will be necessary, I think.
I think we need an apply button, exactly, and I'm sure you can see how that could be done actually purely in wiki text. It would be a macro that used essentially a separate tiddler as a draft tiddler, and when you press the apply button, it would copy the value from that draft tiddler that was tied to the text box to the underlying thing. But yes, it's particularly odd when you try and do it with font size as well. If I try and change the font size to 16, it goes indirectly to 1 point in between. So yes, it would be good to fix that. But so one of the other differences you'll notice is that with TWclassic Classic, you only get a single scroll bar. So you can't independently scroll the sidebar and the body. I felt it was important to do that, and I haven't changed that here. So even though I'm in the fluid layout, I still have an independently scrollable sidebar. So I'd like to make more improvements like this. Some of these layout issues, so what I just explained there was that I personally have some fairly strong views about what constitutes a good layout, but still I would like to accommodate every reasonable respect for layouts, and this is having a fluid layout is absolutely one of the top requests. Okay, some discussion on the side. Jeremy, if you pull your right curtain just a few down, it'll be much more visible. Yes, I might get up and do that in a moment. Steve saying the fluid stuff's a big improvement. I use a wide screen. In the old version, it left half the screen empty. I still think the real use of a wide screen is to show multiple tiddlers side by side. I recently, in my personal note-taking TiddlyWiki, I have taken to having a sidebar tab that's got an edit control for the tiddler that I'm currently working on. So it makes it easy. So the way that I've been working recently is I've taken lots of notes, and now I'm trying to sort of assimilate those notes into one simple narrative tiddler. So in the right hand sidebar, I have that tiddler that I'm working on, and then I'm free to scroll up and down in the story column and refer to different tiddlers in order to, in many cases, drag and drop content. So that what I'm describing there is really a hack, I think, to get around the fact that we really need multi-column support. So there are two ways that we could do multi-column support. Let me show you. So the first way is if I turn on. Oh, Cecily isn't turned on anymore. I think maybe I turned it off because it was confusing to people, but bear with me a second. I need to just add this Cecily plugin. Bear with me. Okay, and now I'm just rebuilding.
Jeremy?
Hello.
Nicolas Spies just joined the group.
Excellent. Nicolas, hi. How are you doing?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, your microphone's working well today. Glad to hear it. Glad you could make it. In fact, would you like to introduce yourself, Nick?
Yeah, I'm from near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I actually have been trying to catch up on JavaScript before I make any more pronouncements about TiddlyWiki. So
great stuff. Well, TiddlyWiki has been the on-ramp to JavaScript for quite a lot of people. and I'm sure you'll enjoy the experience. It's quite fun. We were just talking about side-by-side views. I was just showing how the Cecily view, so this is one of the story views that is actually not enabled by default, but you can install it via the plugin library. What it does is it positions tiddlers according to a map, and that map can have the tiddlers anywhere. They don't actually need to be aligned horizontally, but the default layout has them aligned horizontally. So it's you can see they're a bit small, but I can scroll horizontally and interact with things. So with some adjustments, this could be the basis of one version of a sideways view, where you've got each tiddler consumes its own column, and you'd get basically here you get the same behavior that you're used to. If I click on a link, then the new tiddler opens at the bottom or immediately after the one that you that hosts the link that you clicked on. But I'm more interested in a different approach, which is rather than having a column for every story in the story river, I would like to be able to have multiple story rivers. So that's to say, let's put this back so it's in fixed mode. That would be to say to have a complete story river here, like this, and when I click on a link, just as it does at the moment, the tiddler opens in the same story river. But to be able to right-click on a link or shift-click or something, or drag the link so that this link opens in a new column, then I want to be able, and the purpose of being able to do that is so that I can then I can compare multiple narratives at once, and I can do the thing that I said. I'll try and do the thing that I said. Edit text tiddler equals there. There's somebody needs to mute. I just heard some water pouring. There you go. So now I've created. No, I haven't. Let me just bear with me while I unscreen share, because I need to go to one of my day job wikis in order to copy the code. So bear with me a second. And it's here.
I can take a moment to mention that I will hopefully in this Hangout present a few ideas of mine, and one of them includes actually the basis to be able to have a tiddler that you're looking at, and then have it another version of it or whatever you want next to it, parallel. We'll get back to that later.
Okay, so now let me just, I think we're here now. So here you go. There's an extra tab here called Jotter, and at the moment it contains, it's editing hello there. So if I get the hello there tiddler visible as I make a change, you can see how it live updates the tiddler. And of course I can do things like this to drag and drop content into it. So that's the technique that I was talking about at first. So this is my poor man's way of getting, for me, one of the key advantages of a multi-column layout, which is to be able to keep my position in this editor whilst I'm moving around the story column. And how we've got that within reach, the business of having a single tiddler per column, but how I'm really interested in having multiple story rivers. But yes, it's a sort of thing that we should be paying attention to now. There was a
Jeremy.
Hiya.
Yeah, regarding the new features you mentioned a while back, okay, that and I don't want to blame you because you said that you spent the past 4 years adding new features, and that does not make any difference on TiddlyWiki's popularity. Okay, I don't want to mean that you do things in the wrong way. Okay, but maybe we do not choose the new functions that the people expect. For example, the toolbar is one thing that everyone's expect in any text editor, and we never did that. For example, and the Dropbox that you mentioned is something that lot of people expect once, and there is
Yes,
no.
I mean, look, Danielo, I'm going one step further and saying here is a suggestion for a way that we can classify features as to whether they'll make a difference. So you mentioned the toolbar thing. The toolbar is being worked on, and you know, it's another aspect of TiddlyWiki not being finished. I absolutely acknowledge that it's something that lots of people ask about, a visual editor, and it's a desirable thing to do. But the whole thing I'm saying is that even if we did that, based on what's happened in the past, I do not believe it would have the impact that we think it would. And the reason why I think that is because it takes, in order for people to discover that TiddlyWiki doesn't have a visual editor, they've already had to engage in it. You know, we've already won, if you see what I mean. And if it had a visual editor or if it didn't have a visual editor, I don't believe that it would make a material difference to what people would say about it. Because don't forget that TiddlyWiki's distinctive feature in the world is it lets you do something that you can't do any other way, which is to control your own content and to work on it offline. So we've got to, yeah, I can accept that there are features that our competitors have that we don't have. But I specifically think that trying to match our competitor features isn't the right way to go. We've got to sell TiddlyWiki on its unique benefits. So say there's not an argument to say we shouldn't do the visual editor. It's that just confirming that I still don't think the visual editor will have the impact that we think it will. Not compared to, you know, the category that I mentioned with Dropbox is new features that connect us to a substantial new audience. Now, doing the visual editor won't do that. You know, doing the visual editor gives us a slightly better position on some people's checkboxes of, you know, comparative features, but it's still, yeah. So, as I say, it's subtle because I'm not disagreeing with anything you said really there, Daniele. I very strongly think we need a visual editor in order for TiddlyWiki to be as easy to use as possible and for it to lower the barriers to entry. And what I'm saying is very specifically that even if we do that, I don't think it'll lead to the breakthrough we want. Jed, goodbye.
Maybe I think that TWclassic Classic was very popular when it was a few years ago. Maybe we can think about what made TiddlyWiki Classic so popular on its time.
Well, one of the things I do also find that very interesting because TiddlyWiki Classic became popular when it lacked an enormous number of features. So the first version that went viral of TiddlyWiki was called GTD TiddlyWiki. And it was when TiddlyWiki was on version 1.3 or something. It was very, very early. And it lacked almost all of the features that today TiddlyWiki Classic users would say that they value. And what that taught me then was that what people saw, you know, how people were judging TiddlyWiki, you know, simply didn't include, how can I put it? The lack of features didn't impede TiddlyWiki's popularity. I think what drove its popularity was that it was a novel way of accomplishing something that a lot of people wanted to be able to do. but I also think that it was the GTD TiddlyWiki thing was exactly what I talked about. It was a massive existing community at the time. So there was a big community of people who were interested in GTD, and then TiddlyWiki was presented to that community in a way that was really easy for them to understand and assimilate. So it's actually the experience with TWclassic Classic that has led me to the perspective that I've just been outlining, really. Stephen's saying, do we have a count of users of the two versions? And this is worth remembering that the whole point of TiddlyWiki is TiddlyWiki, when you use TiddlyWiki, you don't leave any footprints. So we have no way of measuring users. I think that's fascinating because in conventional internet startups, internet services, the number of active users is the prime measure. It's the metric that everybody is focused on, and it's the metric that people show off about the most. And yet we don't have access to it. And in the past, sometimes when I've talked to venture capitalists, and I'm talking about the distant past now, before BT, about TiddlyWiki, their first reaction is often to change it so that you can do those measurements. We don't have a count of users of the two versions. I think TiddlyWiki Classic was, TiddlyWiki Classic went viral. And going viral on the internet leaves an enormously long tail. So when you look at things like the Google Trends graph of TiddlyWiki, there's a massive spike and then a slow trail off. And that hasn't happened to TiddlyWiki 5. It has never had that type of exposure. So I think that makes it, you need to compare TiddlyWiki Classic to other things that went viral in the same way. So I know WordPress, for instance, had a massive spike in popularity early in its life when it was, it was new, everybody thought it was the best tool for the job, there wasn't much in the way of competition for it, and so on. And today, it may well be that WordPress isn't the best tool out there, but it is still sustained by the considerable inertia momentum generated by the huge viral exposure they enjoyed earlier on.
Jeremy?
Hello.
What would you say is the three top bottlenecks for the spread of TiddlyWiki?
What do I think?
For the popularity of TiddlyWiki?
What do I think of the
three top bottlenecks?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Lack of a better word.
I don't know, really. I mean, I'm not even sure that. You see, I've been working on TiddlyWiki 5 since 2011. For the first 2 years of that work, TiddlyWiki 5 was unusable by anybody else. It was at best a technology demo, and it was a technology demo that was really only comprehensible to people who knew the inside of my head. So throughout that long period of getting TiddlyWiki from nothing to the point roughly where we went beta, which was at the end of 2013, the only way I could sustain myself through that, because I had very little feedback at that point, because there weren't any users. There's Mario and a few other people were watching the repo, but it was basically me on my own. And I got into a groove then, which was that I felt I had a very clear idea of where I wanted to get to with TiddlyWiki 5, and I felt that the only thing I needed to focus on was making it into a great product and listening to the users. And that strategy, I don't know whether it's worked well. It's worked well for me in that it enabled me to finish the software. And what am I trying to say? That I think I've optimized my life up till now, as far as TiddlyWiki is concerned, to the goal of getting it done and doing my best to work with the community to get as much help as I can. And I think thinking about what are the bottlenecks to TiddlyWiki getting wider exposure is a very different way of thinking. And I think that's what you're seeing over the last 6 months with me, is first the moratorium. That was about the same thing. It was about shifting attention from creating new features and trying to pay attention to the other obstacles that were making TiddlyWiki be hard to use. Recently, you've seen me start to talk more about bringing third-party plugins into the library as well, and that's part of, it's a different type of thing, but it's part of the consolidation. So I want visitors to tiddlywiki.com to be able to see very easily that there is this active, busy community. So that's partly, again, something we've already talked about, better presentation of the news feed on tiddlywiki.com. So yeah, it's a journey. I firmly believe that there is nothing to that the obstacles to TiddlyWiki becoming more popular are not TiddlyWiki itself. So there might be me, there might be us, the way I think about TiddlyWiki, the things I do with TiddlyWiki. But it's also a bit of it is luck, I mean, I think that TWclassic 5 is an enormously more useful product than TWclassic ever was. I think it's more useful for more people in more situations. And I think your presence here, people in the community, is evidence that smart people can see that. And maybe not smart people can see that, but I've been lucky that the TiddlyWiki community is stuffed full of extremely smart people who have been able to see that, So I don't know. I think I'm talking around in circles, really trying to agree very strongly with the general trend here. This is a conversation about making TiddlyWiki more popular. We need more of those. I'm trying to share as clearly as I can what I think I've learned already, and that's particularly this stuff about it's not about new features, it's about presentation, marketing, how we think about TiddlyWiki, how we communicate TiddlyWiki, almost everything else, I suspect, except features. Right, so let's move on, because we've not got an inexhaustible amount of time. Looking at the agenda, there were 2 more things that we'd written down. One was, annoyingly, something raised by Jed. Sorry, the annoyance is that I didn't get to address it whilst Jed was still here. But let's kick off with the other thing, which was Matt asked for an opportunity to launch something, and I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure that I know what it is. But it's got an amazing name. It's called Twaddle. Twaddle. I don't know do you know what twaddle means in English? Oh, you've gone silent. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Hey, do I know what it means? I sure hope I do. But when you put it like that, then you make me worry. Yes, I think twaddle means babble.
Yes, nonsensical babble.
Yes.
So of all the TiddlyWiki words, it's quite a good one. I quite like that.
Yeah, and I like the TW initials for it also.
And the double V.
Okay.
So over to you, Matt.
Yes. So yes, it's the release of. Should I screen share? Perhaps I'll wait a second with screen sharing. It's the release of a community site that I've been working on for some time. It's on twaddle.tiddlyspot.com, and as you probably would guess from a community site, for me, it contains a lot of ideas. And it's kind of a place where I can put them instead of overloading the Google Group boards. So if you go there, okay, I should screen share now, but I'll first just make sure that I get the actual page up. Hold on a second. One second. Okay, so I'll switch over to screen share, the green button, I guess.
Yeah.
And let's see, I got a load of alternatives to screen share here. Is that a new Google feature?
Those are different windows, but normally what most of us find is that it's only sharing the entire screen that works in the way that you expect.
Okay, so that's what I'm choosing now. I am screen sharing, am I?
It hasn't come through yet, but the little icon say, yes, here we go, we're here.
Okay, you see the twaddle, the site there. Okay, I am currently not on the TiddlySpot site because I don't want to mess it up and have it saved to itself if I happen to do any changes. So this is a copy of the Spot site. So this is the introductory page, and it's not quite ready, but thanks to Jeremy's recent information on how to publish something by being able to filter out certain tiddlers. That was the final push that made this possible, because the way I think in the million different thoughts and processes in parallel, so I have so many ideas that I just jot down, which makes them not possible to show for other people. But thanks to this filtering thing that Jeremy showed on the boards, it made it possible so that I could weed out those unfinished things. Not everything here is perfect, though, I should mention. However, what may be of interest, particularly for you guys, should be under tidbits. And that's a bunch of ideas and things that I find to be of value. I'll mention a few specifics. For instance, I'll start with another one. I have discovered a method how you can position elements on the page, on the screen, anywhere you want. It's not my method, of course, but I've found out that we can use it. It's called, delicately named, the Tiddler hooker method, because it hooks elements so that you can put them anywhere on the page. For instance, you see this little fish here? It's outside of the tiddler. And you can position anything. This button, for instance, is a link, so that you can have this positioned anywhere on the page. And I use this quite a lot because it's pretty fun. So you can get this effect with images to be outside of the tiddlers. They can obviously be anywhere on the page. One application for this is in iframes. You can take an iframe, cut out to a piece that you like, as I've done here. This is a small slice from Wikipedia, and you can then move this to wherever you want. And but it's parallel to the to the tiddler. Using this thing, you can also, instead of frame, you can have the editor of the tiddler you're working with, so that is positioned next to the tiddler you're working with. So you can have a view edit in the tiddler and an edit view parallel to it, so that you get like a kind of like a double display of tiddlers if you wanted to. It would require a few more things to do that, but still, that's possible. By the way, this sliding thing, this range slider, it's thanks to Eric's work. He recently constructed a thing so that you can use the HTML5 element range slider in TiddlyWiki. That's thanks to him. So just so that you see this more, this is actually, if I open it up a bit more, you will see that it's actually the whole it's actually the whole Wikipedia page there. As you can see, I set the limits for it so that here, as you can see, so it's actually a Wikipedia page that's just an iframe, but thanks to the clip attribute in iframes, you can clip it down to whichever part you want.
Matt, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, right? There's another. You can do it if you prefer vertical sliders for the vertical parts. Maybe you think this display makes more sense, and then you can have it, like this, instead of having them all. I mean horizontal sliders instead of vertical sliders. The last one, all of them were vertical. Okay, so that was one of the. Yes, there is also something I want to show you that I call TiddlyWiki Glass. It's an idea that I had. Yeah, you recognize this image, the original? It was for the Google Glass. She has a pair of Google glasses on her, but well, my point here is with Google Glass. Even though I call it TiddlyWiki Glass. In fact, TiddlyWiki Glass is a term I came up with back in 2008 to have like a glass window in front of your wiki, or in front of, or I should say, to make TiddlyWiki be kind of a glass shield in front of the rest of the internet, so that you can comment straight onto the rest of the internet, seemingly. This has a few applications that I'm listing here, and these are just a few. I'll try to bring up the more interesting ones. Okay, text on. Okay, we can start with this one, I guess. Here we have, it should just load. It's an iframe that hopefully loads. Yeah. But we're putting our own stuff on top of it. So the scroll, then this little arrow here, for instance, isn't pointing virtue anymore. But anyway, another you can put text on a web page also. So you can comment on external web pages. You can actually chat with a TiddlyWiki user on another server. This is done. I don't know how general it is, but this is a chat with someone named Joe Schmo on TiddlySpace. I don't know if TiddlySpace has some specific, what do you call those things that permit communication over different servers.
Cores.
Cores, yes, exactly, that's the word. Yes, maybe it has some specific generous settings for cores. I don't know. Does it? Do you know, Jeremy?
I don't think it supports cores, but I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, it's terrific. So that means it's very. That would mean it's restricted, right? That would mean it's.
Well, cores doesn't have an impact on iframing. Cores has an impact on XML HTTP requests, basically.
Okay, good then. Well, anyway, so when I write here in this window, here, hi there, Joe, he will see it in his space, and you can go there to the Joe Schmo space, Joe Schmo at joeschmo.tiddlyspace.com, and you will see this message in there. And this yellow thing, I just colored it with a yellow background to make it visible, more visible here, more visual here. These are his comments. Yeah, I think that should be.
Where's the fish?
The fish, because this, yes, you're asking here about this part, right? Oh, what you see here is not what he is seeing. This is what he is writing. Or are you asking on his page? Let's see. Let's see if I can go to Joe. How do I spell Schmo? Yeah.
Another tab, Matt?
Sorry?
You are not opening another tab? Don't you have enough?
Yeah. No, I like tabs. This is just the tabs in one window, by the way. Here you see in the Joe Schmo space, you can see his. This is from me in the Joe Schmo space, and there you see the fish. Is that what you asked? I believe it was Nicolas that asked.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I understand now.
Yeah, there is for some reason too. I'm not sure why. There is also from the TW space showing up, and this is where Joe Schmo is writing. If I log in, I won't do that now. But anyway, this is what he is writing with the yellow background that we can see here. This means that he can also comment on external. Let's see if this brings something new to what I've said. He can comment on external web pages, and then that's connecting to his space. Then I see exactly what he is saying about a third part page. Yeah, I'm not sure if that made sense, but well, anyway, you get to play around with this. Okay, so this is, yeah, so basically the point is this is a new site, and I hope people will find something useful. It contains a lot of thoughts and opinions, or like ideas for how to improve the whole TiddlyWiki project, or parts of it, of course. But since I come from another perspective, I'm not a developer, so I kind of focus more on, I don't know, perhaps the member aspect of it, how to get people to use it, and how we appeal to new people so that they will like TiddlyWiki. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very cool. I shall, Matt, I'll add a link from tiddlywiki.com. Picking up Danielo's comment, it is fascinating to see you successfully working with dozens of tabs, of which it seemed about a third looked like they were TiddlyWikis, so that's good.
Yeah, hey, this is, yeah, that's just, you know, I probably have 100 tabs open in parallel all the time, using different windows. But that's part of also why I love TiddlyWiki so much, because my way of my brain comes up with a zillion things all the time. So I need like a system to organize these things. This is probably also why I come up with some ideas that may not appeal to everyone, but it's part of trying to survive.
I don't. I wouldn't take away the idea that the ideas don't appeal. I mean, don't forget that you're obviously the best mark of approval you can get is that somebody works on your ideas and implements them. But I think that in practice, of course, people have so little time available that you know, a lot of the time the reaction is going to be more of a slow burner than that. I mean, certainly speaking for myself, I talked about how that fluid thing was a reaction, but it wasn't just a reaction to what one person had said. It was a reaction to you know, what a number of people over the years have said, and you know, that's often I think you know that you should measure your impact. It's choosing the right what's the word? Choosing the right granularity to measure your impact, because in fact a lot of the stuff you're proposing, it might take years to, I mean, in fact you did quite a long time ago suggest an edit template update. That's still not been actioned, in fact, but I still hope that it will be, and then it'll be an example of something that's taken 2 years to apply. So we'll see. I was going to ask now if Danielo was able to run a demo, but he's left. He didn't say goodbye, so I assume he's had to go in a rush.
He did say goodbye. He did.
Oh, okay.
It was in a rush, yeah.
So let me just flick. We could flick back to the other item that we had on the agenda, which was Jed asking, Jed saying, I have had absolutely no success figuring out how the story list or the history list actually works. I've been looking at this because he wants to use that information in other contexts. So we could spend a couple of minutes on that, or we could, I don't think it would be a problem to leave that until the next Hangout, when perhaps Jed will be here in person. Oh, I've just realized there's a whole load of questions in the Q&A panel. So if you'll bear with me. Okay, so
by the way, Jeremy, you should perhaps mention that you've started using tiddlyspot for the Hangouts. I'm not sure you did.
Oh no, right at the beginning, I think I showed the wiki. Yes, the plan as an experiment is we're going to have I'll create a TiddlySpot wiki for each Hangout to put the links and so on in. I thought maybe we might have done more kind of interactive changes to that wiki, but it'll, if nothing else, it'll be a kind of snapshot of what TiddlyWiki looked like at the time of the Hangout.
How could we make, if we wanted to make changes to it, how would that work?
We're back to the multi-user editing thing. So at the moment with TiddlySpot, the only way to allow multi-user editing is to share the password, and then you get issues with overwriting one another's changes. But it's, you know, as we discussed before, the goal here is absolutely to do all of our, or to be able to do all of our collaboration within TiddlyWiki, and yes, being able to pull together multiple people's changes into that wiki would be quite an interesting area to experiment on. WebRTC, that kind of thing. But anyway, let me wade through so there's just a few questions in the Q&A panel, and since people have entered them, I think I should answer them. Richard Smith's pointing out that the book of Getting Things Done is being republished this month. So actually that's quite a big deal, that if David Allen, is going around the world whipping up publicity for getting things done. It could be an excellent time for us to emphasize TiddlyWiki's role in that. So thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. A question from Andreas Hahn, who many of you will know. He does the TW Guide site. Last Hangout, you showed that it is possible to open tiddlers in a new window, but mentioned that the URL bar stayed at about blank, at the string about blank. Is it possible that there is a well-defined URL window name that could also be embedded into another website using an iframe? I'm not sure I can decode that. Is it possible that there is a well-defined URL that could also be embedded into it? So I think what Andreas is asking for here is, would it be possible for another website to be able to open a tiddler from tiddlywiki.com in its own window? No, I see what you're asking, Andreas. You're asking about embedding a tiddler in another website using an iframe. Right. Excellent point. So the easiest way to do that is to export the tiddler as HTML and then put it in an iframe. And that's the sort of HTML-ish way of doing it. What we could do, and haven't done yet, is make it so that TiddlyWiki recognizes that it's in an iframe and accepts commands, for want of a better word, such as display such and such a tiddler. So then it would be possible to embed TiddlyWiki in another site, just as you embed tweets in another site. There are several reasons why I've not done that. One is that if you had multiple, if you wanted to show multiple tiddlers from the same site, from tiddlywiki.com, the naive approach would mean that you'd have multiple iframes, each embedding a complete copy of tiddlywiki.com. So that's problematical from a performance point of view. But as I say, really the best answer for embedding tiddlers is static renderings of those tiddlers, because static renderings can go anywhere, where, as I'm sure you'll have found, TiddlyWiki itself, with its reliance on JavaScript, doesn't embed well in other places. So if you try to, for instance, embed TiddlyWiki in a Facebook post, that kind of thing, in all likelihood, you don't get the JavaScript, so you won't see any useful content. Whereas by emitting static HTML, it works everywhere. So, Andreas, I'm not sure if that was a good answer to your question, but sorry, I'm not even sure that I understood the question, but some thoughts on, yes, it would be great to be able to embed tiddlers on external sites, and say some difficulties in figuring out the best way to do that.
Are you sure he didn't mean? By the way, how do you see these questions? When I go to the Q&A, in the left side there is a button for Q&A. Is that where you?
Yes, that's where I'm seeing them. But you must be careful, because I think if you click on things, you might be able, you'll be affecting the same questions as me. So I think you'll be able to select. Yes, you'll be able to select a question.
Because I don't see. I see Andreas Hahn's name appear, and then I see Silvain name and his post there, but under Andreas Hahn's name there is no question visible.
No, it shows up on the video. I mean, the real value of this Q&A thing is that YouTube creates them as table of contents entries, as sort of bookmarks within the video. Okay, there's a new question from Christian de la Serna. Christian, welcome. Yours is not a familiar name, so welcome to the group. Glad you found TiddlyWiki. Christian says, I've been using TiddlyWiki a lot lately and noticed that the process I am using, and most others TiddlyWikis I have found, naturally creates orphan tiddlers. I often use the list widget and wondering if it is possible for a tiddler not to be an orphan if listed. So Christian's raising an excellent point, which is that the orphan tab in the sidebar, there's some specific logic that is used to determine which tiddlers are orphaned. And the logic is that it looks for explicit tiddler links. And any tiddler that isn't the target of an explicit tiddler link is marked as an orphan. Now, an explicit link means a link to that specific tiddler. The other way, obviously, that we create tiddlers, that we create links, is via the list widget. So I can show you an example here, I think, probably most easily. So share the whole screen, and I'll open empty.html. So at the moment, I haven't entered any tiddlers, so my list of orphans is blank. And I'll create a tiddler called my tiddler with nothing in it. And of course, there's no links to that tiddler, so it appears as my tiddler. Sorry, it appears in the list of orphans. But now, if I say, if we give that tiddler the tag something, and now here we can say this filter equals tag. Okay, so what I just typed there creates a list of all the tiddlers typed something, tagged something. So I'll create another tiddler, also tag it something. So now we're in the odd situation that we've got links to those tiddlers, to the tiddler called another and to the tiddler called my tiddler, but those tiddlers are still appearing as orphans. And it's not until we go in here and create explicit links but now those tiddlers disappear from the orphans list. So I'm afraid, Christian, the answer is it's not an easy problem to solve. Within a TiddlyWiki, there can be a vast number of list widgets there. So in order to compute the orphans, we would have to calculate the content of every list within the TiddlyWiki. And that has, or could have in some situations, significant performance impacts. So I must say, in thinking about this, I think that so there's a certain way of working where orphans and the orphan list and the missing tiddler list are very useful. And I think what I would appreciate is more understanding of how people are using orphans and the missing tiddler list, so that we can try and dream up other ways of resolving this problem. So maybe, for instance, a very simple example would be to be able to flick a flag on a tiddler to say, never include this tiddler in the orphan list. And so then in situations such as Christian's describing here, where we've got an automatically generated list to a bunch of tiddlers, we would just provide a means to go bang, make all of those tiddlers that are in that list be tagged so that they won't appear as orphans. So I'm not suggesting that as a solution, by the way. It's exactly as Steve says, it's the equivalent of the old exclude list tag. I'm just pointing out that through understanding the workflows that people are using with missing tiddlers and orphans, we may be able to come up with fixes that avoid the issue that I was talking about, which was the need to compute the output of every single tiddler in the wiki in order to pick up all of the automatically generated lists. So Christian, thank you very much for that question. And of course would encourage you to post to the TiddlyWiki discussion group as the best way to continue discussions like that. Then there's a item in the Q&A list from Silvain, advertising TiddlyCamp Paris on the 6th of June. I mentioned this right at the beginning of the Hangout. I shall be there, looking forward to it very much. First time that we've attempted a TiddlyWiki meetup in France, and it looks like Silvain's managed to gather a bit of interest, got a great looking venue for it, so looking forward to it very much. Then another question from Andreas. What is the plan concerning opening the plugin library to third-party developers? Will it come soon, and can people like me maybe contribute in the development of the mechanics? From what I can tell, there is no information about that available. Andreas, at the moment, what there is a GitHub issue discussing how to accomplish this. So bear with me, and I will find. Here we go. Let me screen share. So it's this ticket, 1696, add third-party plugins to the plugin library. So I think actually maybe, I know you haven't been in this discussion, Andreas, but this is where I've attempted to outline at the top the goals. So there are, to get this right, it needs to be right for end users, it needs to be right for people developing plugins, and it needs to be right for me and the other people in the core team. And we all have slightly different needs, but of course it's the end user needs that are the most vital ones, and the things that I'm most concerned about are things like this one. Plugins should continue to be available if the original author abandons development, and the core team should be able to adopt the plugin if required. So we've seen that this week with TW-viz, I think it was called, which was an early plugin created in the community for adding the viz.js visualizer code. And then it got abandoned, and that's the kind of thing that I would like to avoid. Or Skeeve's new Tiddler plugin, which is available on the internet but is out of date and doesn't work with contemporary versions of TiddlyWiki. So it's been a fair amount of discussion about this stuff, but it is not resolved yet. And Andreas, I would very much welcome your contribution to that discussion. You're a great example of somebody who's been very active in creating things for TiddlyWiki, and as I say, I really need to make sure that this process can be made to fit your workflow, so that it's as easy for you to publish things to the TiddlyWiki plugin library as it is for you to push things to TiddlySpot. Mario makes an excellent suggestion. He says, so this is about the orphan tiddler point, and it's a great point. He says, if a tiddler has a tag, it's pretty, you can be pretty confident that it's not an orphan. So he's suggesting a refinement to the orphan logic. Great idea, and of course, in order to assess whether it's the right idea, we need to hear more from people who are using missing tiddlers and orphan tiddlers. So, guys, thank you very much. We're coming to the point where I need to close. We've just lost Matt, so he didn't get a chance to say goodbye to everybody. But Nick and Steve, let's do our normal wave goodbye to everybody, and then I'll stop the broadcast, and then we'll carry on for a minute or two. So guys, many thanks to everybody. Much appreciate your time and sacrifice, and look forward to seeing you all next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.